In this video, I'm going to show you how to make two different types of hinge systems for your mini album. Both of these are pretty common and there are tons of videos out there. I did not invent either of these. So the first one is called Stack the Deck. With this type of hinge system, you're going to have two pieces of paper overlapping each other with hinges sticking up. Because you have 4 pages, what I have is 4 pages. If you're doing 4 pages, you'll have 2. If you're doing 6 pages, you'll have 3 pieces, and so on. So this type of hinge system, remember my gussets are 1/2 of an inch. My tabs that I'm going to be sliding my pages down on are also going to be 1/2 of an inch. So for this first one, I have this strip cut at 1.5 inches. So that leaves me 1/2 of an inch for the first page, a gusset of 1/2 an inch between the pages, and the next tab that's going to be 1/2 an inch for the next page. I have this piece cut lengthwise to be the same size as my pages. So my pages are 8 1/4, so this is cut at 8 1/4 inches as well. What I did, I've already done this on the first one, I'll show you on the second one. I brought in my cutter. You can use your scoreboard and your scoring tool, line it up at 1/2 an inch and score, line up again at 1/2 an inch and score. So you'll have these different lines already done. Now on this next one, we are going to make the second set of hinges for the outer 2 pages. So this is cut at 2.5 inches by 8 1/4 inches. The reason that we need to make this one bigger is because this piece, when it's folded, we're going to fold on these score lines. When this piece is folded, it's actually going to be glued to the center of this piece. So we actually need to have 1/2 inch gussets on either side of these tabs, and then we want our 1/2 inch tabs for our next papers. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to line this up at 1/2 inch, and I'm going to score this one. Then I'm going to score the other side also at 1/2 inch. And I have the center section completely flat. So whenever I put this in the center, when I line it up, I will have my hinge, a gusset, hinge, gusset, hinge, gusset, hinge. So 4 hinges, 4 pages, 3 gussets. So I'm going to move my cutter out of the way, and I'm going to crease these really well with my bone folder so that they actually move easily. We want to move them in both directions because these are going to be, when your pages turn, the more broken in they are, the better your pages will turn. So what I'm going to do is score these in both directions. And then just get them to bend pretty easily. And do the same thing with the smaller one. And so now we will have these, and there's my hinge. So if I bring in my covers, my hinge is actually going to sit in the center of this. And so then I'm also going to have a 1/2 inch on either side of these 2 hinges. So I have 1/2 inch, a hinge, a gusset, a hinge, a gusset, a hinge, a gusset, a hinge, another 1/2 inch. So that when this album is closed, all those pages will fit inside and there's a little bit of room so that it's not gapping like this and it's not bowed like this. So that is the first way to make a hinge, and what you'll end up doing with this hinge system is just lining this up in the center and gluing it. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to add lots of glue. Again, you can use double-sided tape if you prefer. I prefer glue. I just feel like it holds up over time better than double-sided tape. So whenever I want to make sure that things stay together, I grab my glue over my double-sided tape. If I do use double-sided tape, I actually put a layer of glue over top of it so that I'm using both and I'm making sure that it's going to stick. So I'm going to line this up on this line. I'm going to make sure that it is nice and straight and flat with the bottom and the top. And I'm going to burnish this with my bone folder. I'm going to open this up. And then I'm going to flip it this way. And I'm going to burnish this again. Making sure that nothing slips though, so that everything is nice and straight. So there I have my first hinge system. So this is the piece that will actually get glued into the spine piece. The next hinge system I'm going to show you is the hidden hinge. This is one of the more common types of hinge systems. It's one that I typically use in my albums, but I chose not to for this current album that I'm making. So I'm going to show you with this piece of black cardstock just so that you see what you would do. So for this system, what we're going to be doing is making hinges all in one piece and gussets all in one piece. They're all going to be combined. So with this type of hinge system, you want to cut this, the length of this to be the same size as your pages. So if my pages are 8 1/4, I'm going to cut this 8 1/4. Right now this is a little bit smaller, so if we pretend if my pages are 6 1/2, this is cut at 6 1/2 inches. So whatever your page size is, make sure that your measurement is cut at that. And then you're going to need to have a long strip of paper here because you are going to have a strip of paper 1/2 inch for your gussets, and then you're going to need 1 inch for each hinge. So in my album, I have 4 pages, so I need 4 inches for the hinges, and I'm going to have a 1/2 inch gusset between each of the 4 pages and on each end. So that's 5 1/2 inch gussets. So then I need my 4 inches for the pages and 2 1/2 inches for my gusset. So this piece needs to be at least 6 1/2 inches long. If you have a mini album with a lot of pages, you need to make sure that you have enough room in this piece and the length to be able to do that. You can glue pieces together, but I tend to prefer to do it all in one piece, and I don't typically put a lot of pages in my albums. So what you are going to do to make this system is you're going to line this up. I'm going to use my scoreboard because it's a lot easier. If you have just the cutting board like I showed with the last hinge system, you could do this the same. You're just going to move this every 1/2 inch. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to flip this up, and I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to score again a 1/2 inch later, so at 1 inch. And I'm going to score at 1 1/2 inches and 2 inches. At 2 1/2 inches, at 3 inches, 3 1/2 inches, at 4 inches, at 4 1/2 inches, at 5 inches. At 5 1/2, sometimes my scoreboard doesn't always score this one very well because it folds right there, so I have to be nice and careful. There's 5 1/2, and at 6 inches. So remember, we want this piece to be 6 1/2 inches for my measurements for 4 pages. I'll show you why in just a second here. So we've got the gusset, hinge, gusset, hinge, gusset, hinge, gusset, hinge, gusset. So once we have these marked, we can turn this over, and we know we need to have, I sometimes will also mark this, so this will be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I know where to cut. So I'm going to cut this at 6 1/2 inches. If you label it, it also helps you whenever you are going to glue these hinges together, especially the first couple times you do it, it can be a little confusing. So you have a gusset, the 2 hinges, a gusset, 2 hinges, gusset, 2 hinges, gusset, 2 hinges, and a gusset. What I'm going to do next is I am going to fold and score on each of these different lines. And I am going to go down this page one side at a time, but I'm actually going to score these in both directions. Once you have them scored in one direction, you want to score them in the opposite direction too, because this is actually going to make it easier for your hinges to bend when your pages are in the album. So I just like to do it here before I have the pages already attached. Once you have the hinges folded, what you are going to do is glue them together. So how you're going to glue this together, you are going to add glue or double-sided tape, whichever you prefer, to one of the sections labeled 1. You're going to fold the other section labeled 1 up to meet this one. Burnish it down to make sure that these stay nice and attached. Pull this hinge back, crease this. We next have the gusset, and then we have our number 2s. Put glue on one of the number 2 sections. And fold the other section marked number 2 over the other section that just has glue on it. Make sure that this is glued down. This is going to form the second hinge. We're going to fold back on these 2 now, and we're going to burnish again. Now we have the next gusset and the number 3s. Add glue to one of the number 3 sections. Take the other number 3 section, fold it over top the one with glue. Now we're going to have 3 of them. We're going to fold back and we're going to burnish. We have the next gusset and the number 4s. Add glue to one of the number 4 sections. And fold the other number 4 over to the glue. Now we're going to have 4 sections. Fold over and burnish. Burnish on both sides. And then the side where the hinges are, hold them down one at a time, fold one at a time over, burnish, put the next one, burnish, the third one, burnish, then the 4th one, and burnish. Flip it over, burnish it again. When you flip this over now, you can extend the hinges so that they're sticking up. We have our gusset, hinge, gusset, hinge, gusset, hinge, gusset, hinge, gusset. So we've got our 4 pages, our 5 gussets. The back is flat. So this, when I bring this in to the book. Remember, pretend like it's the size of my book since I'm not using this actual hinge system. It will lay right in this hinge system here. The hinge will lay in the spine section. If you see any of your paper going over the edge of the spine, I slightly trim these. And so whenever I actually make my hinge piece, I will sometimes cut these 1/8 of an inch smaller on each side, just so that I know that it will not go into that. But you can do it later if you want as well. You can just slightly trim it because you don't want a lot of paper going into that, because it's going to add bulk and it's going to start to crinkle. It's going to start to push that up so that it doesn't lay flat. So you want to make sure that that piece here is just slightly smaller. So that is how to make the hidden hinge. Once you have your hinge made, you can go ahead and cover these gussets with some of the decorative paper if you choose to do so. You don't have to, but I did choose to do so for mine. And then one of the last things that you want to do with your hinge is you want to miter the corners of each of these hinges slightly. So you want to go right at the score line and just slightly cut a little bit of the paper out. It's going to make it easier for the pages to slide down on here. So I will show you what I mean as soon as I get all of these cut. So it doesn't have to be a really big cut of paper. It just has to be a small cut. And you want to do this on each of the hinges on both sides. What this step is going to do is make it easier to slide your hinge into the actual pocket pages. So when you take your pocket page and you slide this hinge between the two layers, it's going to slide down all the way to the end. And it won't go any further because this 8 1/4 inches is the same size as my page, so it's not going to shift around. So if I start moving my hinge and my hinge piece, it's not wiggling around, versus if this was a little bit smaller, it would move. So I know that to get my page to go exactly where it needs to be, if I cut that at an angle there, it's going to go all the way in and it's going to sit right on that score line. So all 4 of these, the pages will lay nice and flat. So that's a really helpful step to do to make it easier for when you go to put your pages on.